atomic gigantification was a sweeping Japan nation when along came a dude with an ultra attitude, a Kamen Rider who's the greatest kicker of Japan. And of all, man, life's too short now, baby, to not talk big now, baby.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to Kaiju Conversation. I'm your host, Elijah, and joining me, as always, my lovely co-host and editor.
Hello, I am Rex.
It feels good to say that again.
Oh yeah, you were away last week, weren't you?
Yeah, I've been absent for a week.
Damn, someone got a break finally.
How did it go? I'm horrified. I'm nervous.
What's there to be horrified about?
I don't know. You're a little off the rails sometimes.
Oh, boo-hoo. I'm great, you know it.
How did it go? How was it without one Elijah Thomas?
It went great. Jogan was awesome. I'm awesome. It went great. I don't know what else you want me to say. I don't know what you're expecting.
Well, I figured, how did it go with research?
Research was pretty simple, given most of it was yours.
Oh, so what you're saying is you have something to say to me.
No, I said it in the episode, so...
Say it to my face.
Nah, I'm good, bro. I'll pass. I'm a very stubborn individual. I could stay here for hours.
I can do this all day.
Fine. Thank you. Well, what a dastardly word.
You're welcome, Rex. I'm so glad to help.
It means so much when it's forced out of someone.
It truly does. It brings out something so joyous deep in my soul.
A sadist like you would say something like that.
Hey, the best part of Little Shop of Horrors, the 1986 film, is the Steve Martin, Bill Murray scene.
Never seen it.
Oh my God, you've never... Oh, okay. Well, I've told the story about how, for 3 months I watched Little Shop of Horrors every day, as anytime...
Well, you did do a play for it.
I did. I was the assistant director on a play.
So I'd assume that was during, your time on that?
It was. I literally could recite the movie word for word. I knew how many leaves were made for the movie prop. I know how many leaves were made for our prop. I had the whole script memorized. I knew every character. I knew every location.
Dedicated fan.
But the Bill Murray Steve Martin scene, which is at the dentist office, is actually omitted from the play. That was something added on into the movie. And it's actually some of the best writing in the film because it's a masochist meeting a sadist. And it's like comedy gold because the whole idea is a masochist likes inflicting pain upon himself, which is Bill Murray's character. And a sadist is a guy that likes, or a person that likes inflicting pain on others, who is the dentist. And the fact that the dentist is trying to inflict pain on Bill Murray, and Bill Murray's like, yeah, give it to me. More, give it to me. It's all you got. It's such an amazing concept. I love it. And the special effects from not Rick Baker.
Didn't he work on that?
No, he did not.
Oh, that's right. We talked about that.
It was, so Frank Oz, voice of Yoda, and the Grouch from Sesame Street, directed that. I think he would have ended up being the director of effects too.
Honestly, the only reason I haven't even watched it is because I kind of, just out of morbid curiosity, I want to watch the Roger Corman version first.
Oh, during production I ended up watching the Roger Corman one because it's actually on a box set with the Godzilla movie.
Yeah, it's free on Tubi here, I believe, and a bunch of other streaming services.
And I watched it once and I was like, oh God, there's a reason people don't talk about it nearly as much.
Good to know.
But it was Jack Nicholson's first role, which is really cool.
In that, isn't it?
Yeah. That one, and then Jack Nicholson was also in, I think it's called The Terror.
Is that the movie with the castle?
Yes, with Boris Karloff.
Oh.
And Jack Nicholson's that was his first lead role. It is so weird because he looks the exact same like he did in the 80s, but he's a little skinnier and a little more energetic.
Yeah. That film had correct me if I'm thinking of a wrong film, but that film had 7 directors or something.
I think you're right. I don't know much about The Terror. I've only seen like a public domain copy once.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. Okay, yeah, I am thinking of the right film. Roger Corman, Francis Coppola, apparently.
That's right. I forgot that Francis Coppola did direct that.
Yeah. Jack Hill, Monty Hellman, Dennis Jacob. Nicholson himself might have been a director for some scenes.
It is a very bad movie.
So I've heard. God, yeah, he does look the same, doesn't he?
Yes. I would love to find a way, find time and like buy a bunch of like the Roger Corman, Edgar Allan Poe, Alfred Hitchcock, Universal classic horror movies that are like now in like HD on like Blu-ray and just enjoy watching them. I would love to do that.
Who doesn't enjoy watching classics?
People that say black and white movies aren't good enough.
Bro, I was having a conversation this was a really fun conversation I was having with a couple of people where we were just talking about like movies we'd like and stuff. And one of the guys I was talking about, and he's probably like, out of the people who I was talking with, he was probably the biggest like cinephile out of that group, probably.
Okay, so just so I can understand a little bit more and maybe the audience can, where would he be, like, if you're talking, like, you know me pretty well. Would he know more than me? Would he know a little less?
No. Nothing like you.
Oh,
when I like,
okay. Okay.
Like,
I don't know if I should take
like,
this compliment or not.
Bear in mind, when I say he's the most of a cinephile, this is not an insult towards him. He's a very cool guy, actually. But like his favorite movie is like The Dark Knight, and he's like rewatched a bunch. He's seen like movies like Zootopia and The Incredibles enough times that he can like just quote them easily.
I'm gonna be nice.
But yeah, and I was talking to him, and he was like, "Yeah, the oldest movie I've seen is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest with, or not One Flew. That was the second oldest movie he'd seen. I don't know, some movie from 1967 was the oldest movie he's seen." And I'm like, damn, 1967's your oldest?
We used to know somebody that refused to watch movies before 1993, if you remember correctly.
I'm blanking on who that is, but I don't doubt that's true. I'm sure it is.
So it is, like, honestly, it's really weird. Like, I've heard people legitimately say, like, if it's older than me, I'm not gonna watch it.
Bro, that's crazy to me.
I know. I could never. Like,
it's like, bro, you're missing out, man.
Honestly, out of the last, like, if we look at my top 10 movies of all time, maybe 2 of them are from the last 20 years.
Literally. Like, God, most of my favorites are almost all of them are from well before I was born. Jesus Christ, man.
And the only reason that, like, one of them, I mean, the only reason I think -1 breaks into the 10, and I know Fabelman's does, but the only reason that I love those is because of older films.
Right. Yeah, literally. Yeah.
So, like, I literally could not love the Fabelmans if it wasn't for, like, Jurassic Park, The Lost World, Jurassic Park, Jaws, E.T., like, Duel. Like, it doesn't exist. -1 is another obvious one.
Yeah. Nah, it's like, it's just crazy to me because, like, you're missing out on a whole other world of films there.
You are, and that's the thing, is just like there's so much out there, and you can, like, you know, I mean, you and I talk like usually once a week at least, and we usually talk about movies we've seen, right?
Yeah.
So it's like there's no way that I could exist in a world where I don't try to watch new movies. And like open my mind, like literally, like I've got a couple of German films, I've got some Italian films.
Right. Yeah, no, for me, I've been trying to watch, like, this year, I wouldn't say I've been entirely successful with it, but I've been at least a little bit where it's like I've been trying to, like, at least sprinkle in, like, more movies from other countries than just America and Japan this year. Like I've watched a handful of Hong Kong and South Korean films. I've watched like an Austrian film. Thanks to our Daimajin episode, I watched a Czech film, a couple Italian films, you know. So it's like there's so many people who are just like kind of in like a bubble for like American and like at most like maybe extending to like British cinema.
Mm-hmm.
Like just in that English language bubble. And it's like, man, I could never.
I know. I'm trying to think. I watched Legolem. Trying to think what else. Honestly, I've seen a couple American films. Not as many as honestly, like, and you and I have talked about it. For me right now, and it's been this way for about a year or so, maybe 2 years at this point. Like, I watch more Japanese films than I do American.
Oh yeah, I think that was me like last year and maybe also the year before. Most of what I was watching was Japanese. This year's like a little different where it's like thanks to the Universal monster movies.
Mm-hmm.
I've been watching a bit more American stuff.
See, I'm hopeful because we're just about to hit October, right?
Yeah.
And one of my goals, and this is something I've done for a while, is in October, I want to watch a horror movie every single day. I always end on October 31st with John Carpenter's The Fog. I love John Carpenter's The Fog. That's like top 20 best films of all time for me. And I haven't seen a lot of the Dracula, Mummy, Wolfman movies.
Oh, man.
I've seen...
No better time than now.
And I bought Dracula and I want to say The Wolfman. So I'm going to enjoy those. And then I've got a handful of Japanese horror films I haven't watched yet that I'm going to watch and whatnot. And I might try to see if I can throw in a couple of other ones. If I can find them for a decent price, I might just buy them and be like, hey, I haven't seen some of these. I haven't watched like any Hammer horror.
I mean, that's a blind spot for me as well, actually. I need to at least put on a couple of those sometime.
I know, like, I finally watched Dracula for the first time this year, courtesy of Danny, and that was really cool.
The ghostly one, right?
Yes, and I also watched the Spanish one that night as well. So
I still need to see that one.
So, and I know it's a goal of mine, and you know this goal is like by the end of this year, I need to watch more like Western Dracula movies, more Western vampire movies than Eastern, because right now I've seen more Japanese Dracula films than I have like authentic, true Dracula movies.
Right.
One of my vampire movies is Italian, so it's like I have an Italian one, I have a Spanish one.
You need to show me that one.
I do. I think you would love it. And for anybody who wants to know what we're talking, Planet of the Vampires. Between Planet of the Vampires and John Carpenter's Dark Star.
Yeah, John Carpenter, yeah.
You literally have the blueprints for Alien. And if you want to throw the thing from another world, you can. But honestly, I think those two alone makes it perfect.
God, I'm an Alien fan who hasn't seen those movies. God damn it.
When I finally watched them, because I want to say I watched them because of Memory, that Alien doc about Dan O'Bannon.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was in that because they had footage of Dark Star.
I mean, they talk, like any documentary on Alien usually talks about Dark Star, but Planet of the Vampires I wasn't familiar with until you introduced it to me.
I want to say Memory talks about it. Because, like, I kid you not, there are scenes literally lifted straight from Planet of the Vampires and put into Alien.
Damn.
It's really freaky because, like, you're watching this and you're like, I know exactly what's going on right now. I've seen this before. But it's also, like, bright Technicolor and, like, Italian. And it's really weird. It's a really weird, like, situation to be in. Man.
God, I need to watch some.
One day we will. I know we need to watch Alien and Aliens. Maybe, we could do that for October. Like, do Dark Star one night, Planet of the Vampires,
Genius.
then Alien, then Aliens.
Bro, we're doing that. All right, bro.
That's what we're going to do.
October.
So that's what we'll do. It'll work out.
Scheduled it.
So that means 4 of my 31 days in October are going to be Alien based. And then like 7 of them will be... What
more could you want, honestly?
You got a point. You know, we've been talking so much. I forgot to even ask you, how have you been?
Well, I've been doing pretty good. I climbed a mountain today.
A metaphorical one or a physical one?
A literal Overall mountain. I didn't quite get to the top because at a certain point I chickened out, in all honesty. Like, I was so close.
Why?
I literally just, like, anxiety got the better of me. I have a fear of heights.
I remember when I went to Colorado like 10 years ago. We ended up in Colorado. There's like Pikes Peak, which is a big mountain. Like the Rocky Mountains are in Colorado, and we went up those. And I was like, cool. You get to feeling a little woozy after a little bit, but like you just handle it. It's fine.
But it was still fun though. Either way, still got some great views.
Any photos?
Oh yeah.
Good.
But anyways, how about yourself?
I've been busy. I've been decent. Trying to think. I mean, I've been working. I have been working on a couple things. I tried to get Edo Kami into a film festival. Didn't work out. Outside of that, I submitted a pitch for something today. Can't talk about it.
Rude.
But I will say this. If it is approved, it will be my first hired film direction job.
Nice.
So that's going to be pretty cool.
Pretty exciting from the sounds of it.
It's not like I'm not directing a full-length feature film.
Still exciting.
And it's not like I'm making a ton of money off of it. But like you said, it's still exciting. Like I submitted the pitch today. I have my title. I gave him the title. I have the logo already done. From there, like I'm pretty much... I have everything else pretty much. I just got to go do some like principal photography, like figure out exactly what and where I'm filming at and get my cast.
Nice. So that's not too bad, ain't it?
No. I'm very hopeful because from the way it sounded, my pitch was pretty good and they liked it. So it sounds like it's going to be like an easy... This is going to sound really... I don't know if pretentious is the right word, but it's going to be an easy way in. You know, I will say this. It took me a couple days to figure out the exact story I wanted to go with. But no, I'm very excited. And if it does happen, then that means from about October to January, I'm gonna be working on a project. Here's hoping. Outside of that, I have been working on a Blu-ray, which by now should be announced. I don't know if I should talk about it.
In that case, how about we move on for now?
Yeah, we'll do it. So next time we'll talk about it, but I'll just say this for now. I have been writing scripts. I've been talking with a filmmaker. I've been gearing up. I actually got to reach out to a translator. I think I can say this and not get in trouble. This is the first project that I'm working on that you can probably figure out who I'm working on with, where there's been a great line of communication and a great like connection where it was legitimately like, hey, this is what we're doing, go for it, which was really nice to like be able to jump on stuff before announcements so that we could do the lineup that we have. Because I am a one-man operation, right? With the occasional help of one of my like 3 friends that will help me. I have my camera guy, I have my voiceover guy, wink wink, nudge nudge. I have my writer guy and I have my idea guy. You guys are like what helps me during those moments where it's like I'm in deep doo-doo right now. I don't know what to do. We've got a great lineup. We were able to actually, because of the heads up, I was able to like get us some more stuff. We're going to get some short films from the director as well for this release. So we're going to have the film and then we're going to have some short films. I can say that because that's like really ambiguous. So that was really cool to like be able to approach and say, hey, here's these if we can get these included, like if the license is fine with that, let's do that. And we were able to clear that up. And I'm hoping I can include another thing. I'm going to have to go see if I can get that license myself to be put on the release. I think it'll work out. And so, yeah, it's going to be a good release. I know some people might question the quality of the film, but I will say this. So as we have established from last episode, I did work on Yuzo. And, sure, the film has its flaws, but like working on these films is like a completely different narrative for one. You know, for me, I don't see flaws in a lot of the movie because, like, I'm friends with the director Ishisan and I talk quite frequently, and like I love his style of filmmaking. So not only am I a fan, but I'm also his friend, and then I also worked on the film, and I had to like analyze and look into the production and reasons as to why certain things in the film are the way they are. So for me, it's like I have a fuller understanding of what truly is going on, which is way different than somebody who's just trying to watch a movie for entertainment, right? So, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, sure, the movie that I'm working on now might not be the best of quality, but I also can see past that. And I see the passion, and I feel the passion because I'm in a roundabout way, I'm a part of that passion now. You know, we're bringing the film over for a wider audience. You know, after the limited Blu-ray, it'll go to streaming services, maybe a DVD. It's like, hey, you know, on Yuzo, my content is on that release, on the DVD version. You can literally go to Walmart and buy the DVD and hear my voice. Like, I'm officially a part of that film's legacy, which is really scary. You know, if you don't do a good enough job, it's like, oh, you failed. So it's just a whole nother ball game. And this is what I'll kind of wrap up with, and then we can talk about a couple other things. This year's been really weird. I went from last year, like, doing a short film a year, you know, doing the podcast, you know, the graphics for that, a couple other things, to, like, I'm legitimately, like I'm walking in the door. It's just so weird, you know, as by the end of this year, it's really changed. Like, from where I was at the beginning of the year with Yuzo to where I'm at now, it's like, oh my God, I'm actually going to be directing and writing, you know? So it's one of those kind of things. It's really wild. I don't know. I might have kind of filled up the room there. I don't know if you can really. Yeah,
where does one go after that?
I mean, you've got your whole film school thing. I mean, you've from what I've been hearing and seeing, like that's been a journey for you.
Yeah, we're kicking into starting a short film at the moment. The script is currently half written for the first draft. We've started like doing some of the paperwork for the film itself as well. That has to start kicking into gear very soon, actually.
So what is your role on that short film?
We haven't really decided the crew roles at the moment. I mean, I've done some of the paperwork stuff because I realized the other day that it was like, hey, this stuff is due tonight. We have nothing. So I just like quickly put together some of the paperwork for it that we had to have done. I don't know. We've kind of just been... Most of our discussions have been like just on the story itself rather than necessarily like our actual production roles. Yeah, so I really don't know at the moment.
Well, wouldn't you decide that beforehand so you can kind of get the like main visionary and then like every other role?
We know who the director is. The director is the person who's also writing the screenplay.
So you're not going to be the writer or director?
No.
Has your writer and director figured out what they're doing?
I hope so. We did have a good discussion with him the other day about it. And, you know, there were a fair few notes being shared on it. Granted, there was a document that he was going to share with us that he hasn't sent. Whatever, I'll ask about that sometime soon. It's fine.
So what possible roles would you have? Like cameraman, gaffer, best boy?
There's like camera, sound, lighting. Continuity is one my teacher is like, oh, if someone wants to do continuity, you guys should really look into that.
Oh, continuity is a big thing. I'm a stickler about continuity.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I'll realistically have to take on it like a couple roles because it's like, you know, we only have enough group members. Like, I mean, it's a decently sized group. It's about 8 people.
It's more than I've ever had.
Yeah.
I do it all on mine.
I don't know. Hopefully we'll be figuring more out soon in the coming weeks.
Out of curiosity, what role would you want? What are you hoping to get out of it?
I would like to get more practice on either camera or lighting.
I know you've talked about lighting and like how...
Lighting is like something that I don't know a huge amount about other than just the bare basics of. and I genuinely want to know more. And then camera's always fun.
So, and I know we've talked about this beforehand, but I'm curious if this has changed at all. Has there been any, like, once you graduate, which I know is not like for a little bit, but at this current point in time, what are you wanting to get out of your education?
By what do you mean I want to get out of my education? Like,
okay, so like when I went to my multimedia schooling, I wanted to learn how to like operate a camera and like actually know how to direct.
Yeah.
And get an idea for that. So that's what I went in with.
Yeah.
And I kept that pretty consistent my 2 years I went to school for multimedia. So what is it that you are wanting, like when you graduate, what is it you want to be like, okay, I know this. This is what I can do.
Well, yeah, probably the two like areas I'm most interested in developing my skill set is lighting and or camera. You know, I think another thing I hope to get out of it as well is I know that there can, or at least in the past, have been electives for like work experience. So if possible, I would like to get some work experience.
Nice.
From the course if I can.
It's really fun if you get to like go and like shadow.
Yeah.
And just be like an intern. I got to do that once. Oh my God, it was so fun.
They should let me shadow Monarch.
I would love to do it again. I'm sure I could. I've still got all their contact info. I'm sure if I was just like, hey, I don't want money. I just want to come on. I've done it before with you guys. Please let me. I mean, they told me to like shoot them a message at any time they'd let me come back. I would just love to like actually sit down and talk with like the director and the cameraman,
right?
Maybe even the producers, and kind of get a better concept of like what that's like.
Yeah,
because when I went the first time, I pretty much just was with the production assistants the whole time.
Yeah,
but I'd love to actually like talk and like understand a little bit, because the people, now granted the ones I went to were more commercial shoots, so they weren't like, we're going to get this cool dolly shot that turns into the vertigo shot or anything like that. It was just like, we needed a flat lighting with basic framing on this turntable. But like you said, but still, like, be a sponge, you know, like soak up all the info you can get. It was really cool to like hear all of that. I got to sit by some, like, I think I sat by the director of photography and a lighting technician on our lunch, and they were just talking about like work, and I was like, oh my God, this is so amazing.
My videography friend just got back from a 13-hour drive the other day from New South Wales, where he was doing like videography for a bunch of like race car companies and stuff.
So this is our filmmaking conversation. I feel pretty good about this. Speaking of filmmaking, there is something I do want to talk to you about. It's not kaiju or tokusatsu, but it is a monster.
Oh.
And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. As October is closely approaching, and as we just talked about Dracula and the Mummy and the Wolfman, we got our first look at the upcoming Blumhouse Universal Pictures co-production from the director of 2020's Invisible Man and his upcoming film Wolfman, a remake of the Wolfman 1941 film. And we got our first look at the actual Wolfman himself.
Yeah, the design was, Twitter already made fun of it very quickly.
I saw somebody say, like, it's more accurate to, like, classical depictions of the Wolfman, like a werewolf, which is more of, like, you know, they have the claws and the clothing's ripped up and, like, their head's a little bigger, but outside of that, it's just a couple of strands of hair here and there, and like it's more accurate to, like, I guess, Christian concepts. I guess I don't know. I'm not well versed in the Wolfman.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with like older lore and literature for werewolves or wolfmen, but I don't know. I'm not werewolves that are just like normal people, but fangs and claws is kind of boring to me.
Yeah, I'm kind of there with you.
I prefer the more fantastical of werewolves.
There is something about legitimately a humanoid wolf that I think is just unsettling.
And just really cool as well.
Yeah, and we're not going to get that.
Yeah.
But that being said, I will say this, the trailer does look pretty good.
I mean, I have faith in Leigh Whannell. I've liked the movies he's directed recently, and
what else?
He did Invisible Man and he did Upgrade, which is like a sci-fi thriller.
Gotcha.
And he's also the writer of Saw.
Oh, really?
Yes, he's also one of the main actors in the first Saw.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I'm willing to put faith in it, but it is disappointing to see that is seemingly the design.
Mm-hmm. Now, it is a modern day, like it's straight up like a modern day adaptation too, right?
Yeah, the trailer looks like it's set in the modern day.
I'll be curious. I mean, I still haven't seen his Invisible Man remake. I think, if I remember correctly, they like flipped the idea. And so, like, they made him.
It's basically nothing like the original film.
So, I mean, in that regards, I guess it's not too shocking. But I probably should, first of all, rewatch the original Invisible Man movies and then watch the remake so I have a better idea of what I'm looking at.
I mean, really, the other one that would probably impact your experience is watching or rewatching the original.
True, but if I remember correctly, there's only, like 4 Invisible Man movies? It's the Invisible Man.
Like 6.
Oh, wait, yeah, because there's the Invisible Man, the Invisible Man
Agent,
Returns,
Invisible Woman,
Invisible Woman, Invisible Agent, Invisible Boy, Abbott and Costello meet the Invisible Man. I think that's it.
Something like that.
That sounds right, yeah. And then there's the Japanese films. You've got 2 Daiei films, you've got 1 Toho film, you've got the Atomic Vapor Men, which is H-Man, Talesian, Human Vapor, but that's just getting too crazy now.
The January release date isn't necessarily a great sign, but hey, Megan came out in January, and that was good.
Now, speaking of upcoming films, just a quick plug. On the Kaiju Conversation website, there is 2 new updates. I think we've talked about one of them in the past, but we now have an upcoming Kaiju movies and upcoming Kaiju television tab that showcases all of the upcoming Kaiju projects in development, where they're located, where they're being released, and basic plot synopses, along with any promotional images we can find. It is ever growing and ever changing, so stay tuned and definitely check that out if you're interested in upcoming Kaiju productions.
Well, speaking of horror movies and monsters and all that, have you watched any Tokusatsu recently?
I have not.
Damn.
I've not watched any Tokusatsu. I've actually been, as we know, I've been doing my Zatoichi pilgrimage, if you will. I think last time we talked, I had just watched Zatoichi Challenged, which was about Zatoichi and the boy traveling to meet his father. I have watched 2 Zatoichi movies since then, Zatoichi and the Fugitives, which has Toho's Takashi Shimura in it, and I've also watched Samaritan Zatoichi. So I'm up to Zatoichi meets Yojimbo, which is the 19th film of the 26 film series. So I just have 7 films left. I'm hoping that by our next recording, I can have those done, but we will see. Outside of Zatoichi, I did see a couple of other films. They are borderline monster movies. And you'll notice a theme here. So I saw the 2007, I believe, made for sci-fi TV film Caw, which is about killer ravens attacking a small town. And I watched the 2010 infamous independent film from James Newgan, Birdemic, Shock and Terror.
Love that one.
Have you seen either of those?
No, but I do know what Birdemic is.
Birdemic is like Zillafoot, but without me in it. So I do plan on watching Birdemic 2 and Birdemic 3 Sea Eagle eventually. Hopefully, maybe by the time next recordings happened, I've watched those and I've watched all of Zatoichi.
We shall see.
I'd like to. Now, Rex, have you watched any kaiju or tokusatsu?
The closest to a kaiju film I have watched recently is a sandworm shows up in Beetlejuice 2.
Beetlejuice?
Yes.
How was that?
It was actually a lot of fun. I was pleasantly surprised that it was actually good.
Nice, because it is written and directed by Tim Burton, correct? Or is it just directed?
Yes, not written, no.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think he, as far as I remember, he didn't even write the original.
Well, either way, Tim Burton has had plenty of Godzilla connections, so we can talk about Beetlejuice a little bit.
Oh, that's true.
I mean, you have the Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
I mean, he also was just on a Godzilla set.
Mars Attacks, you have the Godzilla set. He was going to direct Godzilla 94 at one point, and he had a Gamera cameo in Caroline, I think it was.
Coraline.
Whatever. I don't watch.
Oh, wait. It might have been like Frankenweenie or something.
Oh, I think it was Frankenweenie. That sounds right.
Yeah, I think it's that one.
I don't know if he directed it. I know he at least produced it. And there is sandworms, so there are giant monsters. Warner Brothers produced 2 films this year that include sandworms and are big budget blockbusters. Give us kind of the rundown, non-spoilery.
It is a zany, almost mess in almost the best possible way. It doesn't quite reach the height of the original film, but it is still a ton of fun. I was genuinely just had a very pleasant experience watching it. It was very funny. But at certain points, I did wonder, how is this all going to come together in a satisfying way? Which I think it generally works, but a couple things could have maybe been either removed or given more time to shine.
Okay.
And that was probably my big issue. I mean, it's a pretty solid legacy sequel that doesn't overwhelm you with just references. I didn't feel like I didn't completely feel like it was going like, remember this? By this year's standards, I gotta say, it was pretty good. One of the more fun theater experiences I've had this year. That's
good to know. I'm happy to hear that. I might go see it. We'll see.
I'll give it this. It was funny. I actually laughed in the theater. I've been worried just after movies like Deadpool and Wolverine where I'm like, man, Beetlejuice better be funny. And thankfully, it was very funny.
Well, with that, I guess we can transition here now. Typically, we transition into talking about what movie we're watching. But this time around, we do once again have a little bit of listener feedback. So we're gonna look at that, comment on that, and then we're actually gonna transition into the film discourse. This comes from YouTube on our most recent upload there, as of this recording, Gamera versus Barugan. This is from Saiba. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. If not, I'm so sorry. And they said, quote, very interesting movie. I will mention I'm on team like the villain. Next to the Mothra villains, he's smarter and more petty, which makes him stand out. End quote. So Rex, the last time we had some fan comments, it was defending my stance of Barugan having a bad villain, but...
Well, you're just wrong. Onodera's a great villain.
No, and I have...
The fact I can remember his name speaks to the fact that he's a good villain.
I think you're just being overdramatic.
No, I can remember his goddamn name.
No, you're just being overdramatic.
No.
Yes.
No.
You are being way too overdramatic.
No.
You're going to have to calm down.
You just can't handle other opinions.
Sir, you need to calm down. Your anger right now is not good.
I think you just can't handle better opinions.
Please calm down.
Shut up. Well, with all that being said, I think we should transition to the main topic of today's episode.
Yes, so again, thank you, Saiba. I hope I said your name right. Thank you for leaving that comment.
Thank you for having good opinions.
If anybody listening wants to give us a review, you can go over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. You can also comment on any YouTube video, on any post, whether it be mine, Rex's, or the official accounts. You can make your own posts and tag us or add us. You can email us at kaijuconversation@gmail.com, or you can even join our Discord server and add us and let us know what you think or what you have to say. Let us know what you think, whether it be an old episode or a new episode. Anything you want, anything goes. So we love getting fan feedback. We love talking about it, whether that mean we argue for a couple seconds or not. we still love it either way. So thank you again, and let's keep that fan feedback going.
So I have a question for you.
What's the question?
What movie are we covering?
Oh no. So I know.
Did you watch any movies? Like actual Tokusatsu movies, you know?
I know that you said
we were supposed to watch one.
We were, but I've had 2 weeks off, and sometimes you get a little behind, a little. You forget stuff. And if I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember.
And to think you're the main host.
I am. But that's why I have a co-host, so I can be reminded.
God, you're useless.
Hey, I make the graphics, and I do the social media stuff.
Absolutely useless.
And I write the outlines, and I write the outros, and I say the outros, and the intros. In fact, I pay for most of this podcast.
Useless.
Where's the $75 a month I pay for this show, Rex? Where is it?
Well, dear listeners, and Elijah, since he's clearly too brain dead,
I have amnesia sometimes. Okay, I have.
Lay off the coke, Ozzy.
I have titulexia.
That's great.
It's about as bad as my numerical dyslexia.
So today we're covering the warning from space.
It's not the warning from space, it's just warning from space.
Yeah, I realized. Shut up.
Or Spacemen Appear in Tokyo.
Among various other alternative titles.
Which it was released January 29th of 1956. It went straight to TV in America. It was syndicated for American television in 1963 and ended up getting picked up by American International TV, same company that did Yongari Monster from the Deep, Godzilla versus the Sea Monster, Gamera versus Barugon, Gamera versus Gyaos, Gamera versus Guiron, and Gamera versus Viras. AIP also did a ton of other films, such as Magic Serpent, Godzilla versus Hedorah, Godzilla versus The Thing, and whatnot, but those got theatrical showings. The ones I listed off prior were American International Television exclusives. Oh, and Voyage into Space, the Johnny Sacco movie.
It's based on a draft story, not a novel like some sources claim, by Daiei producer Gentaro Nakajima, who was also a politician.
Was he? So when I looked into him, I couldn't find a whole lot.
Yeah, there's not too much on his career at Daiei. There's a little more on his political career, including a little scandal he was involved in.
Now, his political career didn't start until, the late 60s, though, right?
Yeah, and I mean, his most, notable position was, which was, Minister of Education, wasn't until, 87.
Gotcha. Yeah, before that, he was just, is it a representative? Is that what it's called for specific prefectures?
If I'm remembering right.
He would have been a part of the House of Representatives of the Diet, which is 50% of the Diet. The other half is the House of Chancellors. And then, of course, you have the Prime Minister, and then you have the Emperor. It's kind of interesting that he wrote this, or came up with the idea, because this film's kind of interesting. Do you want us to get into that?
Well, I'm curious where you're going into it, because I will say, in previous episodes, we've kind of talked about how some of the previous Daiei films that we've covered, specifically Gamera vs. Gyaos, have seemingly reflected a more pro-government positions and more conservative positions. It is very much worth noting that Gentaro Nakajima was affiliated with the LDP, which is a conservative party.
This film, some people say that it's not really made for anybody. I did some research. I actually went and I did research on the history of color film in Japan, because this is the first science fiction film in color. It beat Rodan by a couple months.
Yeah.
And I thought it was very interesting that that is the most prominent factoid here. You don't go into a lot of exploration with that. Not very many people do. So I went, and I know for all of our Daiei episodes of recent time, we have covered the science fiction, or not the special effects department of Daiei and how that was birthed by Eiji Tsuburaya. We've done the 5 company agreements, which limited artists from going to different companies. We've done research on Daiei Kyoto and Daiei Tokyo and the beginnings of Daiei. And we've done research into how Daiei got their funding for their late 60s, early 70s films, among just kind of seeing how Masashi Nagata got Daiei to exist. And so I was really interested to see why people are very quick to bring up how Warning from Space is the first science fiction film in color. I think it's very interesting that that's immediately the first thing for this film. It's not the weirdness of how the film is presented. It's not the plot. It's not the messages behind the film. It's that it's the first science fiction film in color. So I went, and if you're okay with that, I'm going to kind of dive into this.
Go ahead.
So the first Japanese film in color was a short film from 1937 called 1000 Needles. And it's partially lost to this day. About half of it was found in Russia, but that's all that still exists from that. Actually, any film before 1945 is very hard to come by. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of Japanese films pre-1945 that have just been lost due to the Tokyo firebomb ratings, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the U.S. occupation. They're the casualties of war. Now, the first full-length feature film, from what I could find, was reportedly a film called Tsukigata Hampieta, which is also from 1937. It's based on a play of the same name. It was produced by Dai Nippon Natural Color Film Company with distribution by Nikatsu. Now, this company is what would become Daiei down the road. A couple years later, that's how Daiei would kind of form, is through Nikatsu and their Dai Nippon companies. This film specifically had a French crew behind it. And it's also important to note that the film stock that was used on both of these was like Kodak. Now, for many people, they're like, I don't know the whole, what's the whole thing about Kodak? So if you watch old films, you'll see like Technicolor. You'll see Eastman color. You even see those on a lot of Japanese films. You'll see Fujifilm. Fujifilm is probably the most popular film stock now. You can go buy Fujifilm film stock at Walmart. But at the time, Fujifilm was not nearly as advanced as they were today. So back in the 1940s and 30s, Fujifilm was not ready for color film. They were still developing. So to do color, you had to have foreign film stock. You would have to get it imported. And can you imagine, like in World War II, when you're trying to get film stock from America and you're fighting them, it's not going to work. So especially when you're producing propaganda films. Actually, the second color film, which was titled Song of Spring from 1945, was a Japanese propaganda film for school children and how to handle air raids. It was a silent film, and Fujifilm actually was the one that had to do it because of obvious reasons. But it ended up getting destroyed in the Tokyo fire bombings before it could even be done. And so following that, Fujifilm would be the only way you could actually make color movies. But they weren't ready yet. They were still experimenting. Daiei actually would help Fujifilm by working on a couple films with them called Cabaret Flower Basket from 1949, I believe, and another film called New Wives Conference. Both of these films had Fujifilm color film stock with them. There's also the 1949 science fiction film called Rainbow Man that features color sequences when somebody is on drugs. If you've seen The Tingler, which I don't know if a lot of people have, but what is in The Tingler is anytime there's a couple sequences where there's a lot of blood involved, and what they did is they actually had the blood in color, like bright red in color, and everything else was black and white. It's a really cool effect. It looks amazing. I've seen The Tingler. I actually saw it with Danny, so shout out to Danny for showing me The Tingler. Yeah, so similar to that, but I guess those film elements, as time has gone on, have deteriorated, but I think they also found a way to, like, restore them. So in recent releases, that is still there. But Daiei was helping test and kind of mess with the waters of film stock and color. And so all of this would come to, kind of a good point in 1951 with the film Carmen Comes Home, which was a Shochiku production, not a Daiei film, and it was marketed as the first full-color Japanese film. I did a little bit more digging into why color film, specifically by this point, was such a desirable thing. Because bear in mind, by 1951, Japan had been reformed, but there had not been a color film yet. When you look at, like, America, think of, like, Wizard of Oz, and that was not even the first color film. Wizard of Oz in the 30s was mostly in color, beautiful Technicolor. So in 1951 is the first full-color Japanese film. And the reason that they were pushing for this so much was because there was a lot of American films being imported at the time. And so these American films, some of them were in color, of course, and that made the Japanese audiences crave colorized film. That importation of those foreign goods is what led to the Japanese film industry having to reform and develop their own color film stock. And that's very important for something I'm about to get to. And I'll kind of bring it up throughout the rest of this episode. Daiei, who had helped Fujifilm kind of develop their film stock, would actually stop using Fujifilm. It was not advanced enough for them to use it. Because what they had to do on Carmen Comes Home is they had to film it in color, but they weren't certain it was going to work. So they would film it in color, and then they would go back and do all the scenes in black and white. So it was like a Spanish Dracula, but it's just the same actors, same crew. They're just filming it in black and white. And so Daiei would actually go and get Eastman color film stock and import it. And Daiei Kyoto used that for their 1953 film Gate of Hell, which should sound familiar because that's a very famous movie. Gate of Hell ended up winning them the grand prize at the Cannes Film Festival, which was a pretty big deal. And bear in mind, Daiei Kyoto is the same studio behind Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon, which won an Academy Award. And Nagata oversaw both of these productions. So he would see an importance in that, and they would continue to import American goods because that would appeal to a wider, more international audience. People liked the films that Daiei was producing, and with the introduction to color, it provided a more sustainable international market for their films. By the 1960s, you couldn't show 54 on TV in the late 60s. It had, passed its time, but Warning from Space was in color. You could still show it on TV in the late 60s and it would still make sense. From 1954 up until the end of 1955, I believe it was, they would use Eastman color. They used Eastman color on their films Golden Demon, Messenger from the Moon, and Princess Sen. However, by the time they got to Princess Sen, they would change Eastman color to Daiei color. They would rebrand it to kind of promote the whole this is Daiei's thing. Bear in mind, this was the first use of American film stock in Japan. And if I remember correctly, they actually ended up using Eastman color on the Godzilla films. If I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure I'm correct there that Eastman color is what a lot of those Japanese Godzilla films and kaiju movies in general were made from. But it's very important to note that because Daiei is the one that started that trend yet again. Fought with Princess Sen in some promotional stuff for Messenger from the Moon, they started using Daiei color, which Daiei color existed for a long time following that. Actually, Warning from Space was their 11th production in color. And from what my research showed, most of it was Daiei Tokyo films. So it seemed like they were more willing to give money to Daiei Tokyo to produce those color films, which is really weird because of like Gate of Hell, which was a Daiei Kyoto film, and it did so well. But there are a couple of Daiei Kyoto films. Actually, New Tale of Heiki is revered as one of the best color films of the 1950s, up there with Gate of Hell. And so that was a Daiei Kyoto film. They would actually produce 2 films in that series that both were in color. But the first one specifically is like well remembered by Japanese film historians.
Damn, perhaps maybe color was more of a gimmick for Daiei Tokyo films.
Daiei continued following Warning from Space. They would continue producing color films, mostly in Daiei Tokyo, but following Warning from Space, oddly enough, it was more of a back and forth. Daiei Tokyo would produce one, then Kyoto. Then Tokyo, then Kyoto, then Tokyo, then Kyoto. Daiei Kyoto also produced a film in 1956 called Night River, which some people say is the best use of color in the 1950s in Japanese film. Apparently, it's really, really well done.
What's it called again, sorry?
Night River. It's from 1956. Now, another interesting thing is 1956 would also be the end of the Eastman color use in Daiei films. Warning from Space was one of the last 7 films to actually use Eastman color. So they only used it for quite literally 3 years, 53, 54, and 55. In 1956, their October film, 8:13 a.m., saw them change to AGFA Color, which was a German company creating color film stock. And again, that was the first time German film stock was used in Japan. And then that would become a popular film stock to use in films. And so when you look at it, the whole reason that Daiei was using color by 1956, they were importing American and German film stock. Why is that? Because of how well Gate of Hell did. Where did Gate of Hell do best? The international film market. Daiei was the only film company at the time to break through on the international market. Look at Rashomon. Look at Gate of Hell. Cannes Film Festival. Ugetsu is another one that won some overseas awards. So when people say Warning from Space didn't have an audience, that's not the case. There is an audience for this film, and it's not meant to be Japanese. And throughout the film, you'll notice that there's a lot of Western ideas, a lot of Western things going on, a lot of Western settings, a lot of Western sets. Some people have noted this film took influence from The Day the Earth Stood Still, The Last Day of Earth, and When Worlds Collide, because what was popular in the 1950s? Alien movies, flying saucers. Warning from Space's whole audience is meant to be an international audience. This is supposed to be a film that speaks to an international audience more so than a Japanese one. And so thinking about that, it makes sense why the film attempts to contextualize a Japanese outlook on certain things, right? And it makes sense as to why they push for kind of this international scale problem. And I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, I hadn't actually Hadn't considered that element.
So, but I do want to bring up, this is yet again, Daiei was the one to basically revolutionize color film in Japan. I know that like Nagata is not a good person, and I know that like Daiei probably single-handedly destroyed the Japanese film industry, but I also can't help but think that Daiei is the reason that it had the boom of the 1950s or 60s like it did. Everything in Japanese cinema seems to go back to Daiei for being such a conservative company in terms of like their productions in a lot of cases. They were pretty progressive on the business side of pushing the Japanese film industry forward.
Yeah, I honestly don't know if there's much I can really add to that, but I feel like that brings us to a point where perhaps we should begin the film itself.
I'm sorry to have like went off on that huge tangent there.
No need to apologize. No need whatsoever.
Actually, before we do we want to address the kaiju in the room?
What kaiju?
Exactly. A lot of people like to throw this movie into like the category of kaiju films.
It's not. If you've seen it, you know.
Yeah, it's really weird how many people like put this in as like oh, here's a Daiei kaiju movie. It's like, have you really watched this? I don't think so.
I mean, to be fair, don't even all the American posters kind of make it look like a kaiju film?
Yes, they do. Actually, speaking of which, should we establish our relationships with this film real quick?
For me, what relationship? I've known of it for a while, never seen it until this.
See, I've actually known it. This is probably one of the first tokusatsu films I was aware of existing, which is kind of wild. But also, every time I watched it, I remember either shutting it off, not paying attention, or falling asleep. I had seen it primarily this is actually the first time I've watched the Japanese version. Before this, it was always failed attempts to watch the English version.
Damn.
So in a way, this was my first time, but I've also seen, I knew the plot. I've seen this movie before, but I also haven't sat and watched it all in one sitting.
Transitioning into the film itself, after a nice little splash title card sequence and some credits, we get introduced to whom I thought were going to be two lead characters, Dr. Kimura and a reporter that he's having a little conversation with at the bar. But interestingly enough, this film ends up being more of an ensemble.
Yeah, and I think while that's kind of cool, I feel like there's too much going on for an ensemble to work here. Yeah,
there's too much going on here, and sometimes certain elements that just get too much focus that don't really need to and kind of end up dragging down the film.
I agree. And we're absolutely going to talk about that as the plot goes on here, so I don't want to get too caught up in that. But I also want to bring up something that I think is very interesting about this film is, and this is not like a huge thing, but it's very prominent. The film showcases the railway a lot. And I do wonder if that's something that was included for the simple fact of like the idea of Japan as a modern society. You know, I don't believe the railway was something that was like native to Japan. I didn't do any research into that, but I do think it's interesting how like a train is like the primary way of transportation here. We don't see any other way of transportation outside of train, and we see the train used prominently throughout the film.
I honestly don't remember the trains being used outside of this opening scene.
It's this opening scene on
in the middle there, I guess there's a bit.
There's a bit when they're taking the...
I don't know, I didn't feel like the film particularly called a terrible amount of attention to trains outside of like this opening sequence. I don't know, I didn't really think much of it.
I think there's 4 scenes with the train in it.
But something I did notice throughout from the opening moments and just in general throughout the entire film, the cinematography in this film is absolutely fantastic.
Yes.
This is a visual treat, particularly in just the depth of frames and the framing And also kind of how like the film kind of guides your line of sight throughout a lot of these shots. It's very, very well executed throughout the entire film. It looks fantastic.
The visual focal points are very easy to see here. And I think a part of that too is the color used in the film. They use colors to like help draw people's attention to where they need to go. And I think that's very important, especially when you consider that this was an early color film. This was one of the first 20 color films ever done.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're utilizing color in such a way is very well done.
Yeah. No, it looks absolutely beautiful the entire runtime. Going back to the plot, Kimura and the reporter kind of discuss some UFO reports that have been going around.
You got to acknowledge what cafe they're in.
What?
The cafe they're in?
What about it?
It's called Cafe Cosmo. It's like, whole thing is like it's an outer space cafe.
Oh, I don't remember the subtitles ever pointing that out.
Yeah, no, they point out it's Cafe Cosmo, and like even like you'll see like the moon and stars and the sun are like in the background on the walls and whatnot. And another interesting thing about Cafe Cosmo and just in general, the outside view of a lot of these buildings is undoubtedly Japanese, right? You know, we just, as we're going into the cafe, we see shots of like a traditional alleyway of Japan. But once you enter these buildings, they're very modern looking. They're very sleek for their time. They still have the Japanese twist to them, but they're also very modern, very Western, and very clean. And I think that's something very interesting throughout the film, like I previously mentioned. You see a lot of really clean sets. The only time it gets dirty is during our climax when the world's supposed to be, you know, falling apart or whatever.
Right.
And a very interesting thing that they very clearly did on purpose, and I love that about this film, is the weird Western look that everything has.
Yeah. I wish I could comment more, but genuinely it was not a thought in my mind when I was watching the film, so I didn't notice any of that really. But
like you said, we are watching as they go into this cafe. It's one of our main characters talking to this reporter about some flying saucers, right?
Yeah, they discuss the possibility of it all, and eventually during their discussion they get interrupted by a call about the doctor's daughter, whom we then cut to the introduction with, where she's meeting her uncle, Dr. Matsuda, and more ensemble cast introductions, essentially.
Yeah, and his wife there. So now we're introduced to four of our main characters, in a very English-style kitchen dining room, again.
And we also get introduced to what I was expecting to be a more important subplot in the film about the daughter's marriage, but it really doesn't end up mattering.
No, it doesn't. I don't think it gets brought up again after this scene, if I remember correctly.
I'm pretty sure she's dating one of the characters that's introduced later, Dr. Isobe's son, I think.
They do mention that like she would have a very good match with somebody, which I imagine is in fact the professor's son, who's also a professor.
And we see them spend several scenes together, so I'm pretty sure it's meant to be that character, but it's like...
They're seemingly supposed to be this film's Emiko and Ogata?
I guess.
I've seen a lot of people try to like work this film into like, oh, these characters are supposed to be 54.
Why?
I don't know. I don't really understand. I don't think
the 54 comparisons extend to like anti-nuclear themes in the film. I don't know if you can really draw much else.
They like to say that the first character we're introduced to, I forget his name, starts with an I, doesn't it?
No, it's Dr. Kimura.
Dr. Kimura. People say that that actor was brought on because he looks like Takashi Shimura. I really don't. This is something that I think I've kind of learned is this. A lot of people try to relate this film to 54 for some reason, when I really don't think that this film's trying to be a Godzilla 54. Because bear in mind, by this point,
God, no.
54 wasn't even brought over to the West. As I just established, Daiei was looking to make international hits. They weren't looking to just knock off Japanese films. That's why they did Gamera in 10 years. They weren't looking to do that.
If you're looking towards influences on this film, it's like we already mentioned, alien invasion movies like Day the Earth Stood Still,
which did get released in Japan. A lot of the films I mentioned were released in 1951 and 1953.
Right. I don't get why there's a bunch of comparisons to 54 outside of the nuclear themes.
Even then, I don't think they're the same thing, because this film does say use nukes for the better of good, but it ends up not working, which I think is really good, and we're going to talk about that later on. Yeah, no, this film, I don't think this film matches 54 in any shape, way, or form, outside of just war is bad. Maybe war is bad. But I think that's something that you can commonly find in a lot of these films. And it's not that's a 54 reference. That's just a lot of these filmmakers. I
feel like that might have been a common attitude at the time. War is bad.
Yeah, I feel like that should still be a common attitude.
It just might be.
Yeah, that is something I hope that as we continue to talk here, we kind of really establish that, I guess this is kind of what I'm going to really push for. Warning from Space is not a kaiju movie. It's pretty obvious. If you watch the movie, it's okay, yeah, you're right there. But more so than that, this is not trying to be the Toho kaiju films of this time period. It's not trying to be...
I do think it is kind of funny. The plot of this film is basically Godzilla Final Wars if the Exilians weren't lying.
Yeah, and Gorath. But that came out later. And we're going to bring that up because I have that in my thoughts too. But no, this film is not trying to be Godzilla Raids Again. This film is not trying to be Half Human. This film is not trying to be Godzilla 54 or The Invisible Avenger. It's not even trying to be the Daiei science fiction films of Rainbow Man or Invisible Man Appears. This is just trying, I think this is literally just trying to capitalize on American science fiction films, because I don't see any other influences here.
I mean, yeah, no, 100% I agree. Just throughout, I'm man, especially before the, plot really reveals where it was going, I was just genuinely expecting, just a standard alien invasion flick. Right,
and it's not that. And bear in mind, there was a film that came out 2 years later called Earth versus the Flying Saucer, which is probably what this film many people think it's going to be, where a flying saucer comes down and they try to attack, but it's not that. It's very opposite. Toho, when they did Battle in Outer Space and the Mysterians, is completely different from this movie. And that, again, that speaks to this film not trying to be anything else. This film is indeed unique of its time period.
But speaking of aliens, over at a scientific observatory, it has spotted UFOs seemingly descending down upon Earth, and around the bar and surrounding areas there appears to be radio interference and all sorts of other electrical disturbances, you could say.
It's also worthy enough to note here, the sound effects of the spaceships is what would later be used for Gamera.
Gamera's flying sound, yeah.
Which, funny enough, in the original Gamera, they thought that Gamera was a flying saucer. So there's a little Daiei connection there.
Yeah. Following this, there are some UFO sightings around the world, and eventually even aliens.
Following the main interference, our doctor returns home, where we get more interactions between him and his family. I think we're introduced to his son at this point, too, another member of our ensemble, right?
Well, that's Isobe's son.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's the potential love interest.
I think.
There is definitely potential for a love interest. Whether it's actually showcased or not is, to be determined. I guess in a way you could say that this is similar to the setup of like Yamane and Ogata and Emiko, but it's not.
No, that's a stretch.
I was going to say it's just kind of a stretch. It's just like, oh, the boyfriend, girlfriend, and their father. Like, that's kind of the only similarities that they do have.
I'm going to be honest. If like, genuinely, I would never consider even comparing this to 54 outside of the nuclear themes. If not, people were like, oh, this takes inspiration from 54 or something.
Yeah. Now, I do like the whole fact that our professor refuses to acknowledge the saucers until he finally sees it, and then he's like, well, it's flying saucers. I think that's I don't think that's intentionally supposed to be humorous, but I thought it was humorous. And then they talk about like doing research on it, and that's where we get the fear of the flying saucers starting to like engulf the plot, which is what the plot is pretty much for the next third of the movie is the flying saucer, and not a third, maybe the first 25 minutes. Yeah,
most of this first act is just like the introduction to the aliens of Pyra.
Right. Now, during kind of the following day and the impact of the aliens, we do get to see our observatory again, where all of our scientists are like talking about what to do and whatnot. They go and they do their investigations, and then this is where the Pyra do start showing up.
Terrifying all who encounter them.
I do like the fact that they keep the Pyra hidden, because I think that does add a level of mystique to what are they doing here? What are they? And then like we continue to see them like trying to figure out what's going on and whatnot. And I really do think that works.
Right. During these encounters, there's also this ballroom sequence featuring a famous singer in this universe, Hikari Aozora?
Yes, yeah. And see, she encounters the aliens as well. And then we get to see them in their spaceship up in space.
Yeah.
And this is where my problem is. It's like, for the last like 7-ish minutes, you've been like, glimpses of them in the background and in the darkness and only their eye and whatnot. And then boom, they're just here. Like there's a little bit of buildup, but then it's immediately lost because you just see them. And, it doesn't look the greatest.
Honestly, I actually really liked this scene. I thought it was an interesting decision to kind of drop I don't know how to put it, like the perspective, just a solely like perspective on the human side of this story and then take the aliens perspective for a minute. I thought that was really, really interesting. And it works in like revealing that, hey, these aliens aren't necessarily evil, but also it doesn't necessarily outright make them feel like they're just harmless, friendly aliens completely. There's this unease to this sequence that I actually really like.
I actually never thought about that before, but you do have a good point, and I think the inclusion of like their subtitles here, like they're not humanoid whatsoever. Like we need subtitles to read them.
Right, and then their insults towards like humanity, like this is what they consider a beautiful woman. Can you believe this?
Yeah, it's a little comedic, but
yeah.
it is. You actually do provide a good point here.
Like it detaches them enough where it doesn't outright make them feel like they can't still be a threat.
Right.
Like I wasn't sure where the movie was actually going with this, which I felt made it more interesting. I will say after this scene, I think is where the movie kind of starts to fall short a bit for me.
Yeah.
But like this first 30 minutes into the film, I think is legitimately really solid all around.
Yeah, I think I will agree with you that the first 30 minutes seems very clear on what they're doing. and what they're trying to get done. You know, they're establishing the flying saucers, they're establishing our characters and their relations to each other, and then they establish the aliens' relation to this whole story. But they keep it semi-ambiguous. And then that's when they introduce Planet R, right? Planet R?
I don't think it's mentioned in this scene. It's brought up a bit later when the Pyros properly introduce themselves to humanity.
Right.
But during this scene, one of them does decide to take the form of the singer mentioned previously in order to communicate with humanity, since their alien forms just keep scaring everyone off.
And I will say this, I did appreciate the back and forth discussions here. Like, we actually see them talk about their options.
Right, it's interesting to watch.
I think that's the one point of, like, humanizing them, but it doesn't, like, do it in a way where it's like, oh, these are good guys. It's just like, oh, so they just have personalities. And that's good. Like, giving your aliens personalities, I think, is kind of difficult when you're trying to keep them ambiguous. But when you do it, it just makes them all the more lively.
And it's a shame after this scene, the aliens are never this interesting again.
They quite literally just kind of disappear from here.
Well, not from here, but at a certain point in the movie, they do completely disappear.
Do we want to talk about the transformation sequence?
Sure.
I mean, I don't really have anything to mention. It's okay. It's your typical...
That looks fairly solid, I think.
Fading, you know, typical, like, you've got an image and it fades away, and then you've got a new image and it fades away, and you just kind of continue that until you're to your desired point. I don't really have anything. I didn't know if you had anything you...
No, I've got nothing to say.
Okay. Now, I do think it's an interesting story choice. Following this transformation sequence, we return to Earth, but all of our characters are, like, casual and acting like nothing's happened.
And they're all just conveniently in one location together.
Yeah, and see, this scene, for me, was where it was like, oh god, why are we, like, this is the change in the script, where it's like, okay, why are we doing it this way? You know, why are all of our characters conveniently in the same place? Why is it that the aliens are conveniently in this place? Why is it everybody's acting like nothing ever happened? You know, everything's happy, everything's just there. It's very weird. It's kind of left field, to be honest. It feels more like an ending sequence than the call to action, if you will.
I guess, but during this, when Isobe's son, you know, it's funny, I bring up Isobe. I don't remember him actually getting a proper introduction scene.
Well, he was the one that was in the observatory at the very beginning, when they're kind of like, they allude to him during, like, oh, you should get married. Then it cuts to him, and then we get his and it's not a formal introduction.
No. I'm talking about the doctor Isobe, like the father.
Yeah.
I don't think he actually gets a proper introduction.
He doesn't.
Scene.
No, he just kind of shows up out of nowhere. Yes.
And that's another thing, is that there's sometimes, it almost feels like there's scenes missing from the movie, because sometimes, like in Mr. Isobe's case, I had no clue. I was confused, like, in this scene in particular, like, oh, what's this guy's name? I never caught who this guy was.
Mm-hmm.
And then later in the film, there's kind of like a plot, not a plot MacGuffin, but an item of significance is on Dr. Matsuda, a ring that helps the aliens locate him.
Yes, it appears out of nowhere.
Yeah, it is never established before that scene.
Yeah, I actually wrote that myself on my list of, like, problems.
I was confused, like, wait, did I miss a scene where this was introduced? Like, did Ginkgo give this to him earlier? Or
Yeah, no, there's events that happen in this film where it's just like, okay, so we have a new character, cool.
And then it's funny because that whole subplot ends up being completely pointless anyways.
It's 100% pointless. The aliens, I will say, and perhaps this is part of the issue too, is they're inconsistent from this point on.
Yeah.
They come and go as they please. They don't really, I mean, they end up helping in the last few moments, but before that, they're just kind of like not doing anything.
The thing is, they could save the day
Literally.
by themselves. They just don't until the last minute.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. We're getting ahead of ourselves, but it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, going back to the film, the two seemingly lovebirds are kayaking in the river and end up finding a body. This is the alien that had transformed into the woman in the previous scene, who later gets named Ginkgo.
And we get a whole thing about her and then her, like, real life double, which we never go back to her ever again. It's such a point, like, I don't know, to me it's kind of pointless. You could have just had it been like, oh, she's on the cover of a magazine. You don't really need to show her. I don't know. This film both could be shortened and extended.
Yeah.
And help the plot. Because, like, then she, like, faints, and you would think that, like, it's going to be important as to, like, okay, so there's two of me running around Tokyo, Japan.
No, it's just a gag.
It's just a gag, and then they move on. And then we see Ginkgo and our characters all on the train together again, and they're all just chilling. It's like watching The Breakfast Club, but with a bunch of old people featuring a couple of young people.
And by this point in the film, it's not terribly exciting.
No, it really kind of, specifically, like, once they find her, this movie just kind of halts.
Yeah, it very much drags its feet up until the climax, but even then the climax itself drags its own feet for a good chunk of it.
Even the music, there's certain points, and primarily I think with the aliens, but, like, the music kind of drags throughout the film as well. Like, it doesn't have memorable moments, and when it does have some, like, memorable tracks or, like, some tracks that are, like, important, they don't do a lot with the music. It ends up dragging in those scenes, which I think adds to the kind of the boring nature of this film.
After a few scenes with Ginkgo interacting with our casts and some of our characters investigating certain things, it ends up slowly being revealed to them that she is in fact an alien. In the middle of them discovering this, she also takes a visit to Dr. Machida, where she finds that he's created a formula for an element called urium.
I think is just kind of supposed to be uranium.
Yeah, basically. It's just, nuclear energy, but worse.
Yeah, and she, like, destroys it, but, like, it's fine. Because she takes the papers out of his journal and rips them up and then just disappears again in that sequence. Which, I don't really... You would think she's doing something, but she's actually not.
See, this... I wouldn't have too much issue with this if it's like... It just feels weird for her to do this and go on this speech on, no, you can't use urium, it's this horrible element, which, like, that all is fine until the ending where they end up using urium to save the day.
Right. And that... I had that same issue where it was like, okay, so this is bad. We don't want to use this. Got it. We're not going to use this.
Until we're now going to rely on Dr. Machida, whose formula I just destroyed, but thankfully he remembers it. And, we don't actually need him for any of this. We're just going to do it ourselves. Sorry, guys.
But they also established that they've also made it.
Yeah, which is fine. If they didn't need him, I mean, to be fair, I think it would be fine, because I think it kind of implies, or at least I thought that the aliens, like, had used it, but then had, like, kind of forbidden it from use in their society. Like, that's what I thought the idea was. until then at the end where they just use it to save the day.
Yeah, that is another weird thing, is like it feels more like a plot MacGuffin than anything.
I mean, it being a plot MacGuffin really isn't the issue with it. The issue with it is more just the film's inconsistent writing of the aliens. Whether or not the Urium element is really a plot MacGuffin and doesn't really matter.
I don't know. I kind of felt like it. I feel like there's a lot of plot MacGuffins in this movie. That's something just like I kind of noticed. Speaking of which, we kind of glossed over them learning about Ginkgo being an alien, where we're established that there's like 4 other aliens on the planet, but they only appear twice.
They don't do anything.
Like the aliens in this film, I think their problem is they just feel so inconsistent. Like they try to stop the element be made, but they don't actually do that. There's 4 of them hanging around to help Ginkgo, but they don't ever help her.
I mean, there's no reason to have more than one alien in the film, really.
There's not. They warn of Planet K. That's about it.
Yeah.
But they could have also, like you said, they could have taken care of it. And like the United Nations doesn't even acknowledge Planet K until like it's literally upon them. So it's like, even though they warned them, it's like nothing happened. They would have done something either way whenever the time came. Now, I will say one thing that I do like about this story is how they write the aliens. Because, you know, in a lot of these films, the aliens just land on Japan. They land in Japan and they attack Japan. And that's how they're going to control the world, is attacking Japan. But in this film, they do write it. I think this is the most clever alien in Tokusatsu I've seen, where the reason they go to Japan because they're also here to push like the disarmament of nuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm.
So they're here for like 2 reasons. They say that Japan is the one that would understand the most because of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I think that's a very smart way to write this story. And I love how like the bombs are painted as like a bad thing. And it doesn't end up being pro-nuclear in the terms of like how the bombs are used, because the bombs are pointless. They don't do anything to the planet. And I will say this, and perhaps this is where some of that politics bleeds in. The doctor who creates that formula says that it's for Japan, for the good, you know, using it for good for Japan to create a cleaner energy source, a more powerful thing. I won't sell it to another country. It's for Japan. So there is a hint of nationalism there, you know, that country pride, that imperialism, if you will.
I didn't specifically pick up on that. I was kind of had in the back of my mind to keep out for like, if there were any like small like conservative elements or just like forms of like traditionalism in the film. But really the only one I noticed was like the push for the female character to get married at one point, and then I didn't really pick up on much else other than that.
I could be wrong there, but it definitely does kind of throw out the idea, especially with the minor subplot of like another country or broker tries to like get which that whole thing's literally pointless. That is a waste of time. But like that whole thing of like other countries want this and he says, no, I'm not going to betray my country. It's like, okay, yeah, that's what that's supposed to be. I do also really like the whole concept that like the world nations, as it's called in here, but it's supposed to be like the United Nations. Like they're like not gonna listen to Japan. I think that's really funny.
Yeah, they don't care about the aliens.
Yeah, I think that's a funny thing to do. But it also kind of showcases the idea of like Japan's, like, the people aren't even sold that the aliens are real, because we do see a couple shots of, like, young people just kind of. So, but again, it's like, okay, what are you trying to say here? Are you saying that people believe or don't believe? Because there were flying saucers that made everybody believe, and now they don't believe when they're here. I don't know. It just, there's some back and forth here that I don't think's. There's a lot of stuff in this movie that feels like it happens just to pad out that runtime.
Yeah.
There's a ton of ideas, like the idea that, like, young people aren't going to, or like, aren't acknowledging the aliens. The United Nations isn't acknowledging Japan. The aliens want all nukes to be abolished. The aliens want the new superpower to be abolished. We have to destroy Planet R. We have to evacuate during the time of Planet R's comeuppance. We have to prove the aliens are real. We have to fight off the terrorists. Like, there's just a lot going on in a 86-minute movie,
right,
that has an ensemble cast of like 10 people.
I think the thing with this movie is that the premise itself is actually like a really solid premise. Like, I genuinely thought the story was really interesting to watch unfold. It is very similar to Gorath, but like, even just ignoring that, like, yeah, I know, I thought this was like an interesting premise. But yeah, it's just held back by the pacing and just the padding of the script and all, as well as just these little like story issues of why are the Pyras simultaneously not doing anything, but also then at the end come to be the ones that save the Earth. Like, we really don't get the aliens and humans really working together very much.
They don't even save the doctor, they just untie him.
Right.
Like, he literally almost dies on the way to the observatory. It's like, couldn't you guys have, like, transported him there yourselves? Like, there's so much in this movie that just happens. Like, the whole school children thing, too. I don't really, like, get the whole, we'll keep the children here with all the main characters. Like, it just feels like that's an unnecessary, like, add-on to, like, the stakes. Oh, we have the next generation we're trying to save as well.
I mean, yeah, I think that is all that it's for, is to add to the stakes.
But there's no stakes because I guess you're supposed to care about the Earth. I don't know. I just am, like, bored.
Yeah, that was my issue with this middle act, is that it just kind of becomes, it just kind of, you're slogging through it, essentially.
There's also, like, unnecessary, like, people running and whatnot. I feel like there's a lot of stuff happening, especially in this second act. Because most of that terrorist thing, like, they abduct. At this point, we're talking through, we're about an hour and 5 minutes at this point. Like, he's been abducted by these people. They're prepping for Planet R to show up. The kids are in the basement of the observatory. People are running around. The aliens are nowhere.
Yeah.
Like, they've literally been gone for the last 20 minutes.
Once Ginkgo is revealed as an alien, they genuinely, which is at about like the 50-minute mark, they don't show up until about like the last 5 minutes is the next time they show up.
And it doesn't work. And then we get all of and like the terrorists literally disappear. We don't know what happens after this.
They don't get killed or anything.
There's just so much.
They just kidnap Matsuda so we can have more dramatic tension.
I guess so. We do get a cool shot of the Ginza clock tower. That's in this sequence. Like, following this, we get, like, everything going red and dark.
Right.
Because, like, Planet K's here. We get some decent miniatures. There's some decent miniatures in these sequences.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole flooding thing, which I think's a cool idea. I think because, I mean, that would happen if a planet came that close to Earth. It would mess with the gravitational pull. So we would see tides being different and whatnot. But it also feels like the destruction's pretty tame, all things considered.
Yeah, this is something that would be This whole destruction like sequence is just something that's done better in Gorath. That's all I can really say on it, is that it's Gorath's version of a planet like almost colliding with Earth is a bit longer and more exciting. And also it ends up feeling, in spite of how it's kind of a more fantastical solution to the problem, it ends up feeling less convenient because there isn't just aliens just make the weapon on their own at the end and blow it up.
Right.
Whereas it's like in Gorath, the whole theme of like, this film kind of has the theme of coming together, like humanity coming together in the end of days, and coming together with the aliens even in the end of days. But in Gorath, that's more of an actual like consistent theme throughout the film, with everyone working together to build the what were they, like the station place things in Gorath that they were using to like move the earth essentially. I feel like that theme ends up working better and being more effectively communicated in Gorath, where you really feel like everyone's actually like coming together, because you see, you kind of see the world coming together. You see meetings with leaders across the world. You don't just hear them. You don't just hear about the world nations, but it happens entirely off screen. So in this film, it ends up being like it's just an unknown entity, I guess you could say.
And I think that is where Warning from Space fails at what I think its end goal was supposed to be, is while the film, I think that the facts are there to prove like it's a global problem. They interact with other countries. We have a Japanese character that speaks English throughout the film, talking with other countries. The idea of all the major superpowers using their atomic weapons to destroy this one, this one target. The idea of like foreigners or aliens coming and working together. Like there's an obvious push here for like the international manhood of brotherhood or whatever, that Honda that Honda trope, and we see that prominently in the 1960s Toho films and in some of the 1950s ones as well. But this film just fails at that concept, and that's probably why the film is not well regarded or well recognized, and did not reach the international levels that Nagata and Daiei Tokyo, which was the division of Daiei that produced this one, what they wanted.
Ironically, on that, it's like the issue is, for me, is that the film is too limited to Japan in that. Like, again, going back to Gorath, like those international, like you get several meetings with like world leaders across the world discuss world leaders across the world. People across the world discussing what they're gonna do in response to this situation. And you get a similar thing in movies like Submersion of Japan as well. That film has a whole subplot of like other countries, like instead of just having like terrorists and like a random like country in this film wanting to buy the Urium element and just having this kind of vague, pointless subplot in, I want to say it's Submersion of Japan, there's a more like actually relevant subplot of Australia, if I remember right. The Australian Prime Minister trying to exploit the situation that Japan is facing.
This film, and it's probably, I would chop it up to, it's probably too competent for the time it was made in. And it was trying to shoot for the stars, no pun intended there, way too early. Because I think at the end of the day, this film failed at what it was trying to be, like we've established. And perhaps if this had been produced just a few years later, it would have worked out better. I think it was a very progressive concept. The idea of like a Japanese film showcasing world unity. Because, I mean, it's I haven't seen Gorath, but I know in Godzilla Final Wars, that's, if the Exilians were telling the truth, that's what they were pushing for. I know in the Mysterians, that's kind of what they tried to allude to, and granted, they ended up lying, but that was what they initially came with. Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, the Venusian, is there to help save humanity. Humanity has to stop these events. The Exilians lie in Astro Monster, but in there they kind of push for this world peace thing. In all the Godzilla films, there's this push for like unity with people. Mothra versus Godzilla. The Infant Islanders team up with the Japanese. It is not a foreign concept to kaiju films or tokusatsu to have world peace. This film, I think, is just an early example of trying to do that without understanding to properly accomplish that you need to include foreign characters and locations and ideas to really make the film feel international, bigger than it truly is. And I think that's one of the biggest problems, is this film feels really small for the concept it's bringing.
Yeah.
We follow an ensemble, which is bigger than a main character with supporting characters, but that's all we follow. We don't really leave the observatory, right? Like, most of the final, basically the entire final act occurs on that soundstage of the basement of...
The only time we leave it is when we're just wasting time with Matsuda.
Exactly. For a plot line that you could cut and just have him there, perhaps he doesn't have the paperwork and he has to figure it out again. That would have been a lot more interesting, of like him plus the other characters helping to get it figured out, than, oh, we'll just go find him. Now he has to find his way back. Which is what the film ends up doing in a very anticlimactic, like, his building is the only one that's falling apart, but it's falling apart nonetheless.
Alas, he is helped a little by the aliens and eventually wanders into the observatory on his own. And the aliens just build the bomb by themselves and blow up our planet saved. Humanity did nothing to save the day.
And then they all just run out of the observatory and say, Yahoo.
The end.
It's such an abrupt ending.
It's just an anticlimax. And that was Warning from Space.
Whew. That was a warning from space. I don't know if it was the warning from space, but it was a warning from space.
I like how the end title card is off center.
Yeah. Rex, do you have anything else you really want to talk about?
Not in particular, outside of like just transitioning into the final thoughts, really. Do you?
I do have. I got a couple more things here, and then we can do our final thoughts. This was shot in fall of 1955. You can see that by the fall on location shooting they did,
especially for that like river scene.
And then the color work. So the person that supervised the coloration for this film is also the same person that designed the aliens for this,
right? Taro Okamoto, who
did the logo design for the film Onibaba, the Tokyo Olympics participation medal, the Sapporo Olympics commercial or commemorative medal, and Tower of the Sun, the famous Expo 70 statue that is so prominently showcased in a ton of Japanese pop culture. So he got to do all of that. So that's pretty cool. I just had those brief factoids, and that was really it. We can go into our final thoughts and then cast and crew and wrap this up.
Alrighty. Sounds good to me.
Honestly, like, Warning from Space is just a slog. It feels like it's trying to be more than it actually is. The three scientist leads have no depth to them. Like, there's no character development in this film. Every character ends the film exactly where they started. Just everybody comes across as like a side character. and none of them really have anything that's truly important to the plot. We're just kind of watching them go through this. There's no, like, the only one is the one doctor that creates the formula for the bomb, but he doesn't even, like, use it. It's the aliens that do.
Right.
You know, like I said, the destruction scenes and whatnot feel very kind of disconjointed and really lackluster. And even the alien aspect is very lacking. There's not a lot of alien action, and there's certainly not a lot going on with them.
Right.
So overall, Warning from Space to me just was kind of, it's a very boring movie. There's a reason in the 15 years I've known its existence, I've never really been able to sit through it.
Yeah, no, I don't know. For me, it was like, it started off really, really promising. Like, the cinematography is absolutely beautiful. And I think genuinely the first act is actually really, really solid. But once after Ginkgo gets introduced, that's where the film just, as you said, starts to become an absolute slog to get through, and just odd writing decisions just end up getting in the way of everything else. And again, the lack of real character development to any of our cast members just kind of makes it so I can't ignore the writing flaws here, because it's really all that the film is giving me to work with, outside of a couple of the thematic elements that aren't even particularly well executed, as we pointed out, especially with the theme of coming together. Overall, if you want to watch Warning from Space, I would honestly just recommend go watch Gorath first instead. It's this story, but generally more focused and better executed.
Yeah, I would honestly say the only reason to watch Warning from Space is if you're trying to watch all class, like, I don't know, maybe if you're like trying to do research into the building blocks of Tokusatsu. I don't know, like, it's not a required watch by any means for anybody. It's interesting if you want to know the history, but that's about it. Plus, I mean, if you listen to this, you literally just got the whole plot. We kind of spoiled it if you haven't watched it and you're still listening.
Sorry for spoiling an almost 70-year-old film.
Are we ready for cast and crew?
I think so.
So starting with our crew, Koji Shima, director, also directed Ghost Story, The Whole Falls. The screenplay was by Hideo Oguni, who worked on Ghost Train, Ikaru, Seven Samurai, I Live in Fear, Vampire Moth. Oh, by the way, yes, I'm being dead serious. The guy that wrote this movie worked on a ton of Kurosawa films.
Yep.
The Ghost of Yotsuya, 1956, Throne of Blood, The Hidden Fortress, The Bad Sleep Will, Sanjiro, High and Low, Redbeard, Dotsukadan, Ron, and The Lower Depths. I guess that really just kind of goes to show just how much influence Kurosawa had on these scripts. Seitaro Omori was your composer. He worked on Zatoichi and the Doomed Man, Ghost Story Depths of Kasane, Ghost Story Hole of Falls, and Gappa, the Triphibian Monster. Masashi Nagata, your producer, worked on Rashomon, Buddha, Gamera the Giant Monster, Gamera vs. Barugon, Daimajin, Return of Daimajin, Wrath of Daimajin, Conflagration, The Snake Girl and the Silver-Haired Witch, Gamera vs. Viras, Yokai Monsters, 100 Monsters, The Snow Woman, Kaiden Utsushina Shiane, Yokai Monsters, Spook Warfare, Gamera vs. Guiron, Yokai Monsters Along with Ghosts, Gamera vs. Jiger, and The Ghost of Kasane. And then your special effects director, Toru Matoba, worked on Invisible Man vs. the Human Fly, Buddha, The Whale God, Ultra Q, Ultraman, Monster Busca, Ultra 7, Operation Mystery, and Ultraman Great Monster Battle. And as for your cast, Shozo Nabuo, who played Dr. Itsobe, was in Invisible Man Appears, Ugetsu, Sancho the Bailiff, Lone Wolf, The Tale of Zatoichi, The Haunted Castle, Zatoichi and the Fugitives, Yokai Monsters, 100 Monsters, Wrath of Daimajin, Tale of Zatoichi Continues, Invisible Man vs. the Human Fly, The Ghost of Yotsuya, and the Ghost Cat in the mysterious Shaninse. Meguro Sachiko, who played Mrs. Sobe, was in The Snake Girl and the Silver-Haired Witch and Garo. Keizo Kawasaki played Toru Isobe, was in Buddha. Buntaro Mikagi played Dr. Kamura, was in Rainbow Man, Gamera vs. Barugon, Ghost Story, The Whole Falls, Mirror Man, Ghost Story, the TV show, Fireman, Kamen Rider V3, Typhoon Reporter, Buddha, and The Invisible Man vs. the Human Fly. Meiko Nagi played Tako Kamura. Isayo Yamagata played Dr. Matsuda. He was in Eagle of the Pacific, Seven Samurai, Ultraman Ace, A Ghost Story of Japan, and Zatoichi's Pilgrimage. Hirai Kyoko played Miss Matsuda, was in Rainbow Man and Ghost Story The Whole Falls. Kanji Kawanahara played Dr. Takashima, was in The Whale God. And Toyumi Kirata played Ginkgo / Hikari Hozora. And that is your casting crew. And with that, we have actually covered a good amount of Daei's early science fiction films.
Damn.
In terms of what's left, really, we have The Invisible Man Appears and The Invisible Man vs. the Human Fly, and we've covered everything that's been released stateside up until 1968, which would be Gamera vs. Viras. Oh no, I guess we have 1966 with Return of Daimajin and Wrath of Daimajin.
Oh, yeah.
We still have those to cover. And then it's 1968 with Viras and Yokai Monsters 100 Monsters. So we're covering those Daiei films slowly but surely. So Rex, I just have one last thing to say, really.
And what's that?
Hello. I'm Elijah and I have a Kaiju and Tokusatsu problem. Joking aside, I am Elijah Thomas. I am a writer. I have written for GodzillaMovies.com and in Kaiju Ramen Magazine, Kaiju United, of which I'm the Chief Innovative Officer for, and my writing has also been featured in the book Giant Bug Cinema, a Monster Kid's Guide from Bear Manor Media, where I wrote about Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. Outside of writing and podcasting, I also served as a consultant on the upcoming Titanic Creations officially licensed Yonguri articulated figure. Go to titaniccreations.com/Yonguri to order yours today. I've also had the privilege to produce bonus features for SRS Cinema. I have worked on Yuzo, the biggest battle in Tokyo, Liverleaf, and War of the Ninja Monsters, Jiron vs. Gora. You can order all of those Blu-rays on srscinema.com with more announcements coming. I'm also a filmmaker and YouTuber. You can check out my stuff on my YouTube channel, ET13 Productions, where you can see some of my short films and older YouTube videos, along with a playlist that's growing that features all of my appearances on YouTube. I do plan on getting more videos out soon, so definitely check that out. You can also check out my action figure photography on my Instagram at ET13_productions and my ex, the artist formerly known as Twitter, thanks Danny, at the same handle. Now Rex, where can people find you at?
Well, dear listeners, you can find me on YouTube at Rexina, on Twitter at Rex_Xenomorph, and on Instagram, Rex_Zeta. And if you want to check out some of my writing, go take a look at the Tokusatsu Network.
And as for the podcast, don't forget to rate us on iTunes to boost our ratings and helps us get recommended to more people just like you. If you don't have an Apple device, which I don't blame you, I don't actually, that's a lie. I'm literally using one right now. But you can rate us on Spotify. To stay up to date with all things Kaiju Conversation related, head over to www.kaijuconversation.com to find all of our episodes, social media, news, and updates. Follow us on Twitter at KAIJU_CONVERS. If you don't have Twitter, you can follow us on Instagram or like us on Facebook at the same handle. If you're like me before podcasting and you don't have any social media, lucky you. You can email us at kaijuconversation@gmail.com, all lowercase, all one word, you know the drill. And as always, we'll read your reviews on air for everyone to hear. We also have a Teespring store. Eventually, we're going to have original artwork on there, but until then, you can sport our awesome logo on a t-shirt or maybe even a coffee mug. If you'd like to chat with us, check out our Discord server full of others that have similar interests to you. Recently, in our General 1 chat, there was a discussion about Godzilla vs. Megalon and Godzilla vs. Gigan. It's a great community full of great people. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you can be notified anytime we upload a video. We sometimes post exclusives to the channel like bloopers for episodes or minisodes talking about news or other subjects. We also have an interview with MechaGodzilla designer Jerk Javeski on the channel, and I definitely butchered his name. I'm so sorry about that. And a huge thanks to Rex for editing all of these episodes and all the other content we upload. His links can be found in the description below. Along with Rex, we'd like to give a huge thanks and shout out to Danny DiManna of the Godzilla Novelization Project for his amazing vocals on our theme song. You can support him by following him on Twitter at Danzilla93_GNP or visit his website GodzillaNovelizationProject.com. And a huge thanks to Grattan Conwell from the podcast Giant Monster BS for composing the music for our theme song. You can support him by following the podcast on Twitter at Giant Monster BS or on any podcast platform under the name Giant Monster BS. And with that, we're going to wrap things up here. So thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you, Rex. Again, another Daiei episode in the bag. We are dying it up in here.
Never make a Daiei pun again.
Why? Would you die if I did?
No.
Hey, that was a good one, right? I'm not going to survive after this recording, so this will be my last time saying this, so please listen up here. And as always, please remember, life's too short to not talk big. Bye, guys!
Bye.
We are set, we are in debt, there's nothing to sweat. Life's too short now, baby. To not talk big now, baby. Conversation. His name's Elijah, baby. And also Rex now, baby. We love those kaiju, baby. And you will too now.